So maybe if someone had already a question for this presentation or one of the presentations that were earlier, please feel free to ask.
Yes, we have Dr. Osama.
Yes, okay. I have questions for Myrna Safwat. Myrna Safwat, the third presentations, I think. Yes, third presentation. Myrna?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yes, I am interested about using depth map or space syntax in narrow architecture. Can you clarify the relation between, because depth map and space syntax, as I know, give the idea about the connectivity between spaces, and you are using this simulation to clarify the connectivity between the nurse's desk and the patient room, right?
One of the factors, yes, it's the inpatient room entrances and the nurse station.
Okay, so how this simulation reflect the principle of narrow architecture principles, okay, in your research?
First, I want to clarify that neuroscience tools and neuroarchitecture, it gives architects major guidelines for the response of the human mind to the architecture or architectural space. It doesn't give us how to measure it or I can say how to apply it on our design, And this is what is the research focus on? The research focus on how we can apply the principles of neuroarchitecture in the design from the early design process. As I already said, three categories of neuroarchitecture principles: planning and navigation, sorry for the noise, planning and navigation, enriched interior spaces, and connectivity with nature. And the scope was planning and navigation. The research studies many methodologies, and I choose the space syntax, or we choose space syntax as a tool to computerize or computational use of the principle. And how can we measure the neuroarchitecture principles in 2D or 3D, like Dr. Henry said, 3D, but the paper focus was on 2D. So space syntax was just a tool, not the principle or the main focus of the paper. It's a tool to computerize or simulate some principles that is already concluded from the neuroarchitecture studies using neuroscience tools, like neuroimaging techniques.
I understand that. Thank you very much. I think if you can focus in your future research about other principles of neuroscience, it will be help for researcher to identify the mental health in healthcare facilities related to neuroscience. Okay, thank you very much for your.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Maybe just to add for Myrna Safwat, the research that is being done by Julio Bermudez, he is also looking at neuroarchitecture and neuroactivity in the human brain, but especially associated with the experience of church spaces. So these are spaces that are meant to provide a certain impression, a feeling of meditation in these sacred spaces. So he did some neural research on this correlation between brain activity and how people perceive these spaces. So I think that could be an interesting reference for you to look at, because it gives this very wealthy, you could say, source of information.
Thanks a lot.
If I could move the discussion to the first two papers, which were more about augmented reality virtual environments. Both presenters talked in the beginning about using these technologies for the design process, but then throughout the presentation, the focus shifted towards design education. And I think there is a big difference between looking at these technologies for design, you could say, in a professional environment, and design as a support tool for teaching students. So are you looking at ways how to evaluate or test your technologies with students? So how would you go about in your research with that?
Maybe I can respond to this question. Thank you very much, Henry, for this valuable question. Actually, throughout the process, we discussed about this issue, how we differentiate these two activities, pedagogical approach versus architectural design practice. But what intersects in both methodologies is the conceptual design phase, how we approach to the unknown environment of modeling, or in this case, it's an augmented reality application environment. So it's a bit unknown environment, and I think it would be suitable both in the professional practice and in educational part, the conceptual design phase. I think that's what we thought it would be applicable in that sense.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yes, thank you very much for your answer. So maybe Mohammed, yeah.
To also add to Sabil's point as well, the idea of testing out, having the educational platform as a testing ground to also allow the students to, develop and practice with new tools. A lot of the students now currently for our design studio class, we're focusing on the master's cohort. So most of which already have the architectural background basis from their undergrad studies. Now you go into the masters where they look into more or less experimenting with new tools, and that's what we look into, developing right now, seeing how we can actually utilize the VR and AR tools as fundamental tool sets that can aid their design process. So we have two initial, modules that are currently ongoing, one of which is called virtual environments, which introduces VR for people who have not tried VR in the past, and a lot of which have not, surprisingly. Or never touched a VR device in the past. So that's one part. The second is the Design Studio module, which also runs hand in hand with the Virtual Environments module. So they're able to learn the VR tools and also implement them in Design Studio at the same time.
Okay, thanks. Also, if I may, on your slide 11, I think you showed this table with an overview of the technologies that you looked at, and there was one column where you had the integration in the design studio, and the only options were yes or no. And probably it will be interesting to refine that question a little bit more. How is it used? What kind of processes? What were the students doing when they were using these techniques? Was it for final presentation? Was it for concept design? Yeah, so you could ask many questions, which are now, I would say, very simplified in this column, yes or no, in the design studio.
So for that page in particular, I can open the presentation again if you just to clarify. Please. So let me go ahead and open this again. Where is it? There it is. Let me see can you see the screen?
Yes.
So this was the table you were referring to?
Exactly.
Yes. So the yes and no actually was to highlight whether the research paper that I was talking about, so you can see the reference of each researcher, Bricken and Byrne, Alvarado and Maver on the very far right of the table. So it's simply a question saying if this method has been incorporated in Design Studio, or has this been practiced in an academic or public platform. So in this case, the project that was done in Swivel was not. The VEL lab was implemented in an educational platform. So the yes and no is referring to whether it was implemented in an academic platform or if it has not been implemented. So there is a certain criteria that we highlighted here. The number of whether the software is encouraged multi-user support, yes and no. Whether it was whether the software offered simple tools that were accessible, or whether it offered advanced tools like object manipulation and further expansion of object facing. So that's where you have the yes and no factors. So it was either yes or no based on the paper's the paper output itself.
I understand.
Yes.
The way you present it, it's like a retrospective, right? You look at papers that have already been produced to analyze what has been going on, and you draw your conclusions. So in what sense would you like to go forward? Do you see a more speculative, experimental approach, how you want to use these technologies in design?
So in this case, this is more or less one of the first steps we have as a review paper that highlights what is currently out there and what has currently been done with the softwares. Now, the Gravity Sketch, which is currently one of our testing platforms, and also Unity, they're both softwares that don't define the project. They simply offer us with tools that meet our criteria for allowing advanced tool manipulation and also accessible design and UI. Also looking at Unity, which also offers the available tool sets that are compatible with a high number of softwares. So in this case, it's to answer your question, I would say that it's more of an experimental approach that follows a certain design methodology that will work in a form of a cycle. Starting off with the site analysis and data collection phase, and then going into form finding techniques that incorporates a 2-week workshop of developing and shaping these 3D scans in VR to be able to form and find out different shapes that can then be in relation to the site itself, and then so on and forth, working with each person's initial design tool set and going into Unity for further elaboration and assessment.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, I think it's very exciting and still a lot of things to do.
It's going to be a long journey.
Yeah. Okay, maybe if you can stop sharing the screen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Any questions from the audience? Maybe some of the speakers would like to react to the other speakers' presentations. Yes, Osama?
Yes, I have a question for first authors, Civil. Actually, the experimental of using augmented reality, mobile augmented reality through design studio is so interested. And I am wondering about the duration of using this experimental with a student in the first phase of design process. Okay, and I see figure number 9 talking about the building performance in relation to wind direction, like CFD program and so on. How you can clarify this augmented reality through the building performance with CFD, and if there the student make a design decisions related to this experimental to take appropriate building materials or building facade or something like that. Do you understand me, right?
I think so. I think we can respond this question together with Esranur, but please let me start. Thank you very much for this valuable question, first of all. I would like to clarify, we proposed a graphical user interface and a methodology, but it's a prototype at the moment. That means we didn't have chance to test with the students. However, we have a projection that we may potentially implement this methodology in the conceptual design phase. for novice designers or architects who are not familiar to the augmented reality applications. So these are the target groups that to serve. Coming to your second part of your question, so see, you mentioned how you incorporate CFD, something similar to fluid dynamics. So the model would like to integrate various other performances as well, which include structural performance, environmental performance as well, and certainly wind analysis and computational fluid dynamics. So it's an integrated model in which the user can interact with various aspects of performance, but in the central core, it's material. How the user starts by choosing materials and specify the material constraints related to these performance aspects. Right? I would like to ask you whether I was able to clarify your question.
Yes, thank you very much. In the framework, you mentioned that the first figure of framework in the paper, you mentioned that you use database like Google Scholars and so on to find 242 research papers. What is the step after you find this and classify this research? Do you build your framework after you read that?
Sure. This is why we did the literature review. We wanted to have a system how we analyze the literature. So, but it's not a review paper. Certainly, we extended that work towards a research paper by building our own methodology.
Yeah, but
Esra Nur, please correct me.
Systematic
you would
review.
like to add? She would also contribute.
Systematic review? Do you use systematic review? Because if you use systematic review, I think the figure should clarify the including and excluded terminology that you mentioned in your research.
Certainly. We definitely spoke about this issue. Maybe we didn't underlined it. Certainly, there are some constraints. There are some specific keywords that we constrained our research. Yeah, but thank you very much for your comment.
Thank you very much for that.
Actually, in our research paper, you can also analyze. You can also look at our research paper. Actually, we didn't mention them in this slide, but yeah, we mentioned details about this literature review part in our paper.
So more details are in the written paper.
Thank you very much for this communication.
Thank
you. Nice work, actually, nice work.
Thanks very much.
Yes, this is of course also a very good invitation for everyone to refer back to the published paper, because it's of course impossible to put all the information of the work in a 10-minute presentation. So if you are interested, feel free to read the paper in your own time, and of course you can always come back to the authors later on. In some way, the first paper and the last paper, I see some relationship that where in the first paper you could say building in real time a model, which then gets overlaid with simulation aspects, and also with the last paper where a digital twin is being created. So I'm just seeing if I can rattle the cage a little bit between the two authors. So question for Meriam, when you talk about the digital twin, it is the digital twin of what? What are you making the digital twin of? Is it a realized building or a design in progress, or? Hello? Miriam, are you still here? Yes, you are. Okay. So the digital twin that you are talking about in your presentation, do you see it as a digital twin of the design as the architect is working, or is it of an object that is already finished? I'm not sure if I'm the only one who cannot hear if you are speaking or not. Hello, hello?
No, the voice is not.
Yeah. But the microphone is working, I think. Okay, maybe Mariam, if you can try and see if your microphone will work, then maybe I will switch back to Seville. In your case, it's very clearly that you are making that you are modeling a digital model in as work in progress. Yeah.
Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a technical problem. Sorry, I'm very sorry.
No problem.
So, can you repeat your question, please?
Okay. So in both the first and the last paper presentations, you are talking about building a model. In the case of the first paper, it's clearly a model that is like work in progress in a design context, you could say. So I have a question. When you talk about the digital twin in your research, is that a digital twin of the documentation of a model in the design process, or is it more the classical understanding of a digital twin of a building that is already finished?
Honestly, it can work for the two. Digital twin, we can integrate it either in a process on the conception process, on the modeling process. But in this paper, I mean the project which is in phase on conception. So when I talk about phases, they are, I mean the phases of conception, the process of conception, and it can and the main goal is to allow a global view to all stakeholders, and of course the client also. It can visit the state, the dynamic state of the evolution of the project in the real time, and it can make some suggestion and make with an area to chat and to make its remarks.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Seville, if I guess one of the things that your model should be able to support is actually the modeling itself. You have physical objects, you make a prototype, and I suppose you use these AR technologies to look at what is being built, and from that you construct the digital model. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, I agree as well. Similar to Mariam, we use modeling techniques, but also simulation techniques to integrate the knowledge and support the decision-making process of the designer. Because we are architects, we are not trained as engineers. These engineering tools are critical; they're necessary in the design process, especially for computational designers. I think this is one of the largest advantage for us, that we are able to integrate not only the design knowledge, but knowledge from other disciplines. And in this case, we use engineering knowledge. And I believe that these technologies would extend the knowledge of architects for sure in the near future.
Okay, thank you. I think that Mariam also agrees with what you are
Yes, I
saying.
agree. Yes, I agree. Exactly.
Holistic design. I mean, this architecture students generally doesn't take into account the material and structural performance challenges so into their design solutions, especially at the early design phase. So for a more holistic design, it would be so we think it would be more appropriate if we use more applications.
Yeah. Okay. Time is running out. First of all, thank you very much, all the presenters, for your presentations in this session.